All right. Welcome back to the podcast. Welcome back to Theory and Theology. On this podcast, we talk a lot about spirituality and about religion and about cultures and different kind of belief systems, theories. Okay, so guys, I have come across something that actually disgusted me. I actually didn't finish watching the content, and I'm not going to describe the details of it because I just, ew. Not blaming Eli Yoder, but, he basically, I believe it was a TikTok video he posted with a Mennonite lady who he interviewed about this concept of the holy kiss. I'm not sure exactly what the Mennonites follow regarding this. I've heard about some Amish groups doing the same thing. Now I know in the New Testament of the Bible, the Christian Bible, there's a sentence that says, I don't know if this is even the full sentence or the whole context of like, greet one another with a holy kiss. A holy kiss. Greet one another with a holy kiss. I don't believe it was in the Gospels. I think it was either in the book of Acts, or something Paul wrote, or one of the other, like Timothy or somebody else. I believe. I believe it was in one of the letters to one of the churches. I should look this up, but if you guys really want to know, you'll look it up yourself. So, and find the context with it too. But I never really understood that. The only time I've ever heard it used, not really actually being used in practice, but I mean, the only time I've ever heard somebody reference that verse was when I was maybe either, I can't remember if I was in like my senior year of high school or like early days of college at community college. I cannot recall. I think maybe I was in college. Maybe it was like my first year of college or so. The reason I say that is because there was like a 2-year back-to-back period where I was hanging out with a specific person who was a good friend. Still is. We're just not in touch at all. Pentecostal, very religious person who, he didn't listen to secular music or anything like that. So at this time, the youth collegiate pastor took a group of us to, it was I think at the Angel Stadium, this Greg Laurie, I think it was called like Christian Crusade or something like that, Crusades. The name never, when I started learning about what the Crusades were and stuff, I was like, I don't really like that name for like Christian events, but I mean, whatever, they use it a lot, at least they used to. But I think it was called like Harvest Crusade or Harvest Festival or something like that, and they would host it at the Angel Stadium every year, and I think it's free. I think it's done. I think it's passed, but it's usually when they do it, it's Christian bands. And let me look it up because I don't even know. Is it called Harvest Crusade? Oh my gosh, I can't type. Angel Stadium Harvest Crusade. Yeah, that's what it's called. Oh, so it's Saturday, November 5th, and then the following Sunday. that next consecutive Sunday. Okay, so it hasn't come up yet. I was kind of hoping that I hadn't missed it because I didn't really know um, if it was even still going on. But I might try and catch it this year if the bands are worth it. But basically, after or during, I guess, Greg Laurie, when I went, I think I've been like 4 times, maybe 5 times or so. 3 times I remember pretty clearly, but I feel like I've been more than that. So basically, we would go after church because, the Adventist church, you go to church, and so on Saturdays. And so we would go after church, and we would come to, I don't know, I guess we would leave from the church or from wherever after lunch or something. And we would drive, through LA to Orange County to the Anaheim Angel Stadium. I feel like it was Anaheim back then, but now it's like LA Angels and Anaheim. I don't know what the heck. But that's what we used to do. So we were usually late because it's free, right? So it's general admission, at least when I would go. It was general admit, free. I can't remember if parking was free because I never drove. We carpooled as a group with the church. And I would show up, with my group of people. We would go inside, we would find seating. Now, I remember the majority of the time we never got good seats. Most of the time we sat towards the corner of the stage, if not even behind the stage some of the times, because like I said, we were late. And so because we were late, we never got to sit like close or anything. I'm pretty sure people got there like 1 to 2 hours in advance. We weren't that early. And so we would go and we would kind of just sit, get our free seats, sit where we were going to sit. Sometimes, if you're in the back, there's like screens so you can like see it, but you can still feel the energy and feel the music and stuff. And like, I was always like, it was fun. Like, I saw Delirious a couple times. I think I saw Sonic Flood. POD was my favorite who I ever saw. The pastors hated them. I remember they were like, I can't believe this. I was so happy to see POD. We sat behind the stage that year though. I think what's their name? It starts with an S. Not Simple Plan. What's their freaking name? I want to say I saw Reliant K there, but I think I saw them elsewhere. I can't remember. I saw them a few times. Who's the one who makes Only Hope? All my female friends used to be like so in love with these guys. Switchfoot. I keep wanting to say Slipknot. Switchfoot. Slipknot is not a Christian band. Switchfoot used to play at a lot of Christian concerts and venues and stuff. They would go to Fish Fest and all that kind of stuff. And then yeah, they would go and yeah, we would watch them. And then, during the sermon, we were allowed to either sit through the sermon or walk around. I remember some years sitting through the sermon, getting like the free New Testament Bible. Oh my gosh, now I'm distracted. Somebody called me. I keep getting like spam calls. So where was I? We would so one year I got it was like a little paperback green New Living Translation version free Bible. And then I remember watching a lot of people, some of the friends I knew, some people were just other people, and I would kind of watch them kind of say that they were going to get saved, become Christians, or rededicate their lives to God. And seeing how many people went down there and stuff. I think some of the people I knew went down there, but this is so many years ago, I don't remember the details, but I'm pretty sure because I remember waiting for people to come back so that we could leave. Like, once they went down there, we had to wait for them to come back to our seats so that we could actually leave. because it was like an altar call. But if you think of like a whole, like the Angel Stadium, I don't remember if it was completely full, but it was full enough that it was a large amount of people, and they would kind of flood down. They were safely kind of like going down to the field, to make the visual statement in public that they were getting saved. And then they basically went up to they went back up to their seats. I think there was like an ending, a little bit of an end to it. They would go back to their seats. I don't remember if it ended with them at the altar call or if it ended with them, coming back to their seats and then there was like a closing or something. I can't remember at all. But I remember one year we went to we went outside because we were gonna just walk around. Like, there's stuff going on. I don't remember if we were trying to get food or just like, lemonades, or like why we left. But, the pastor would usually just let us roam free. Like, he didn't really chaperone us that much. And this is like back before we really had cell phones like that. Like, we kind of had them, but we didn't really use them. We weren't like texting and being like, hey, I'm going to be over here. Like, but he didn't care. He just kind of, we knew where the seats were, and he was our ride. So it's like we were going to have to find one another. He kind of gave us enough freedom. So that was kind of cool. I'm just kind of remembering how that was. Like, yeah, he didn't really like, he wasn't too like, like some of the other pastors were, where they would just be like, no, you have to go with me, or like, even if you're going to the bathroom, we have to go as a group, and like all this kind of stuff. It was like, he would just let you go, and then when it's time to go, it's time to go. Or like you meet at the car, or like we'd have like a meetup spot, and then we'd all just get there. I don't ever remember calling each other or texting each other or anything, being like, oh, like I can't find you. And we were never really up to no good. I mean, we were sometimes, but I mean, at that event, I don't think we were. And I remember there were protesters. And I remember, like, I don't know, there was something about it that I loved, I loved it. They were protesting Greg Laurie. They were protesting a pastor, and these people were Christian people that were against his teachings, or against, I don't know if it was just Greg Laurie's teachings, but against like the Bible to some extent or something. And they would just be asking and saying like all these challenging questions, like, I don't remember what they just had like an argument for everything. And I think one main point that they were trying to get across that stuck out to me was that in their opinion, God is not love. And then they say, we'll look at the flood, we'll look at, Job, we'll look at, the human condition, like, and just using Bible verses, and then like, just saying stuff like, God says in the Bible that he's a jealous God, and that, like, they were just going through stuff like that, right? Like, they were just on and on and on, with that form of a topic. And, it was, I don't know, it got my heart racing. I was like, in like an excitable way. I was like pumped up about it. I was like, yes, I can finally like argue with people about the Bible. And like, like I was so into it. Like, literally, I was so into it that literally the next year I wanted to come back to that concert just to go argue with the protesters. I was like so into it. Like, I wasn't even trying to like be right or whatever. And I remember being super pissed off at the end. But maybe I was trying to be right. I don't know, because I really thought I was right. But it was an event like that kind of shaped a lot of my understanding that, not everybody believes the same in the world, but basically, all the arguing back and forth, there were like people that were like refuting all the stuff these guys were saying, and they would just like yell out something like a verse of the Bible or something, and just like put an interpretation on like this, like God is not love, God hates, or like God is jealous, or like God is, like they would just like say stuff like that, and I would just be like, no, that's wrong, because we were taught, this explanation. And then they would come back with the Bible about, well, what about this? Well, what about that? Well, what about this? And I'd be like, whoa, like, I have to like think about this more. But in my head, I was still like, they're so wrong. But I'm like, that was just such a cool experience. Even though I got pissed about it, like, it was such a cool experience. And I remember me and that friend, we were all arguing, we were all just like fired up and just like, these people are like disgracing the word of God, like we're like, but we weren't like yelling at them. We were actually like listening to the arguments and trying to like use our own biblical knowledge from what we were taught, because we were like, this friend of mine was taught in a Pentecostal church that was it's actually down the street from my folks' place, but he lived on the other side of town in like Lawndale or Hawthorne or something. I think Lawndale. And he was really into like prayer meetings. Like, he would do like full day prayer at when he was in university. Like I mentioned, he never listened to secular music. He was pretty hardcore. He read the Bible every day, and we were kind of his social circle. Like, he basically, we would go skiing, snowboarding together. He skied. We would go snowboarding together. I know he was like super into football. He would play sports. I think he was in one of the crews that I would play like soccer, I think basketball with. I think he would play basketball with us. He was kind of quiet. When I first met him, he never really talked, but like, he started going to our Friday night. It was called Teen Rap. He started going to our Friday night, technically a Vespers for like people in their teens and 20s, and then it became a little older after that. We were able to kind of, like, I could talk Bible with this guy. Like, I learned a lot from him too, like, because he went to a church where they learned a lot. Like, at our church, we were encouraged to learn a lot, and on Friday nights, we did do a lot of like discussion, and then Saturday mornings, there was a lot of discussion and like, like reading and like studying. But at church itself, it was kind of like dumbed down. So, after like a certain age, when you go to church for so long, you're just kind of like, whatever. But it was so dumbed down that I was just like, never really, I felt like I had to develop what I was learning on my own. And then, like I mentioned before, I've always been pretty like gravitated towards the Bible. I was never like, there was a point where like I was like, no, but nobody had to like, I'm not trying to like toot my own horn, but I'm just saying, like, nobody was ever like raising me to like read the Bible. You need to read the Bible. Like, I was raised like most little kids of like, okay, kneel down and say that now I lay me down to sleep kind of prayer, and like we went to church all the time. But like, and I don't even say it as a I'm not trying to brag or anything about reading the Bible. I don't care. I'm just saying, I gravitated towards it. I was a complete geek and nerd about it from a child age. Like I mentioned, when I used to have nightmares at night or couldn't sleep at night, I would turn on church radio and listen to sermons. Like, that's the little kid that I was, I would, like, that's what I did. Like, I used to read the King James Version Bible that my grandma gave me, and I'd be like, one of these days I'm gonna understand what this means, like, I was into it, just kind of naturally on my own. It was just something that naturally interested me, and I was around it a lot too, but I talk about it more so to say, like, it was part of my lifestyle. It wasn't really like, it's not something to brag about. Like, part of me is kind of sometimes like glad that I learned about the Bible and all that kind of stuff, and then part of me almost wishes that I kind of never really spent that much energy on it, because it is kind of hard to think outside of it. Not that I must, or not that it matters if I do or not, but it does kind of give me kind of like a different color lens to kind of see the world through, that I notice myself constantly having to challenge this, you know, just tradition, you know, these traditions that you were taught are for your salvation, you know, is like, you know, having that mindset and always thinking like I have to do this stuff that these people teach me, because if I don't do it, I'm gonna go to hell. Like when you grow up thinking like that, you know, or getting that kind of message, however subtly it may be, and that you know, somehow you're part of the group that knows more accurate information than any other people who study this. But then when you start questioning different discrepancies, and you just never, ever, ever, ever get like a solid answer from the people that are supposed to be the professionals, that was kind of like not helpful for me. So, yeah, but the only time I heard somebody mentioning like Holy Kiss was in that environment when we were arguing with the protesters. And somebody I didn't even know, there were multiple people around, and some guy that was also arguing against the protesters was like, you know, the Bible says to greet one another with a holy kiss, and you're not, you know, this isn't a holy kiss. Like, you guys are just like, you know, like trying to like get people angry and stuff like that. So he kind of mentioned it like that. And then you know, I never really heard it used before or after that, like in a practical way, or like never really paid attention to it until, you know, listening to this Eli Yoder. Like, he mentioned it before. Someone had mentioned before, I think it was Amish Potato. He mentioned before about, you know, how the Amish church service in his community was. And so he was the one who mentioned kind of like the process of what happens in like sequential order for a church service. And part of that he did mention was like the holy kiss. And then I never really heard it mentioned outside of those couple times in my life. And it is kind of rare, you know, like I always find it rare when there's a biblical topic that I haven't heard. Like, I haven't heard it all, but there's some things that you would feel like people would expand on more, and that's one of them that I never heard really expanded on or practiced or used. I've never really heard about it. And it's just always shocking because, you know, I was raised like in a religious environment. So being raised in a religious environment and then having come across something from like a biblical text that you never really had to really challenge or think about or look at or anything, that is kind of rare. Because most of the typical topics that we could have gone through, we've kind of gone through them and kind of beat them to death, you know. But he mentioned, you know, this lady, I mean, she mentioned some details that I'm not going to really discuss, you know, pretty much how the Holy Kiss works. I mean, she was mentioning as a like, so the Amish Potato YouTuber, YouTube handle, his church was Amish, and he talked about men doing the holy kiss. I didn't know that women did it too, and Mennonites and Amish are different, but this Mennonite lady was talking about her experience with it, that when she turned 14, she started, when she went to church, she would experience the holy kiss when she went. And just briefly, what it is basically everyone in the church of a certain gender just comes by and kisses you. I don't know how long this lasts. I don't know anything, but the things that, like I mentioned at the beginning, I kind of got grossed out. The things that kind of grossed me out were kind of two things I could pinpoint. I'm not gonna, without going into detail, that you know, the concept of you know, keeping people in scaring people, I guess, out of educating themselves about different types of topics, saying that it's too worldly and, it's sinful to educate yourself about certain stuff. That's a toxic trait of churches that I've noticed. That is something that does come up, that churches will say sometimes. Some of them do have that message where they're just like, certain forms of education are wrong and certain forms of education are right. And then when it comes to like consent, she was kind of mentioning consent as far as like that she didn't really know about consent because of her educational background, and that she wasn't really consenting to this. She was kind of more like coerced, just out of a control aspect of somebody saying you have to follow these traditions, because if you don't follow them you're going to go to hell, right? So being kind of scared, and then also not really being able to expand and educate yourself and challenge your mind on different traditions, and just being told to just do them without expanding on that. To me, those things are pretty toxic, and I think that for me those things are kind of like a sign of, you gotta look out when you see a person or a group or a church or whatever it may be telling you to not do this certain stuff. When you see that happening right in front of your face, and they discourage you from like study, they discourage you from like learning. Like I mentioned, maybe I didn't mention this, but when I was growing up, like I think most people who follow on here probably, if you've listened long enough, you've probably heard me mention how I was like really into studying Hebrew and Jewish culture, like more so for the roots of how Christianity looks so different. And like I was always trying to come to, okay, like, because the church I was a part of, we did the Sabbath, and certain like dietary restrictions, very similar to what Jewish people might do. But then there were other stuff that Jewish people did that I was like, well, why don't we do that? Because that's in the Bible too, and they're doing it, and we do some stuff that they do that other Christians don't do, but why don't we do all the rest of it? I could never get answers to that. And so I was like, well, let me just start at the beginning then, and let me learn how to read Hebrew and figure out what the Jews do. And so I basically learned, around age 12, Jews usually, religious Jews will have like a bar or bat mitzvah. And, they kind of go through a process of either being around or learning the Hebrew language so they can read from the Torah and the other writings of the Old Testament as whatever their portion is for the time that they're bar or bat mitzvah, and then they become a man or a woman in that religion. And I was like, well, we don't really do that, but we do have baptism, and it does usually get offered around age 12 or 13. And I don't remember when I first started learning Hebrew, but I remember I started through the library, websites too. I think it was Beverly Hills Chabad website, and then also through the public library. I would get like they had like one book of like Teach Yourself Hebrew, but it wasn't the Teach Yourself series. It was another just like book that was just like really hard to understand, but I learned the alphabet and learned how the letters sound, and then all that kind of stuff. And then I would go to Borders and like read Hebrew, how to read Hebrew, and like I just spent a lot of time on it till I could read it, not really understand it, but I could like read it, like the words, and I could recognize like names or numbers and like stuff like that, like just basic stuff. But I was happy with the amount of that I got to with reading, because then I could look at like the Old Testament, the Jewish Old Testament, and like read along with it in Hebrew, and then kind of look at the translation in English. Like I knew enough words to kind of fill in the blanks of like, okay, this says, and Moses went to the mountain and God spoke to him, or something like that. Like I could probably make out a sentence like that generally. I couldn't like create the sentence. There were a lot of things I never really understood, like how the letters look, some way, like, I don't know, the word structures and the syntax and all that. There was so much that I just like never really fully understood because I didn't really study it. Like, I did study it, but I also wasn't like exposed to it. It was all like self-study, self-taught. So I remember later on in my church experience, probably my first year of grad school, I remember the day too, because I remember I used to volunteer for the church, but I had already left. I didn't live locally, but I would come home on the weekends to go to church. And because I lived like up in like downtown LA area, and so I would come down and at that time I did for school, for grad school, my first year of grad school. And then I came down because I was still involved with the church. And I remember starting, like, the first Sabbath, I remember that I wanted to go to this, the local Messianic Jewish church. And I couldn't, I got there, but it was like a holiday of some sort. I think it was Sukkot, because they were at a park where they would do like camping and stuff outside. I think it was Sukkot. That was the first Sabbath I tried to go. So I basically went to church because I had to volunteer that morning to do the welcome. So I did the welcoming. Basically you just hand out bulletins in the front door, and then once the church was gonna start for the Messianic church, I was like, that's fine. I'll go over to the Messianic congregation. So then I went, but the church wasn't going because they weren't out on the site. So I remember like looking, it was like in a little plaza, and I was like trying to look around the back gate. I'm like, maybe there's another door, but nobody was there. I think I called the rabbi's phone number and left him a message, and otherwise, didn't get a response back. So I'm like, okay, I'll try next week. I don't remember if I emailed him or texted him or what, but I remember that's how I first got in touch. I was like, I've been looking for a Messianic Jewish church forever, explained my background, explained kind of where I came from. And he kind of started explaining all that to me, and I was like, cool. Like, and I went, I had a great time. It was an awesome time for me. And I basically, started learning with them for maybe like a year. But I remember my church was like, why are you talking to those guys? Like, I remember I had some friends approach me like, oh, so are you becoming Jewish now? And I'm like, why would you have a problem with the Messianic Jews? Like, they basically are like Adventists, just they have Jewish traditions. Like, they do the stuff that you guys are always like ragging on other people for not doing. They keep the Sabbath. They don't eat pork, like whatever. Those are like the two main things that you see come up so much in the Adventist church, because it's so different from a lot of mainstream Christianity that they kind of pride themselves on those things being different. And so, it was kind of interesting that people were getting a little concerned that I was going to this other church. And then I remember my mom started coming too, but at a certain time, I started going to this other church that started at like 3 p.m. Because that's kind of where, it was like, okay, I could like rest in the mornings, and, I was getting pretty stressed out with school. So I no longer wanted to be like studying the Bible all week. And then, so I didn't really want to go to church. I didn't go to the Adventist church anymore in the mornings. I didn't go to the Messianic church that was scheduled a little, I think, later or something. I didn't go, and then I went to the 3 o'clock service that usually ended close to, when Sabbath was over, and then I would just leave and study. So, other than resting on Saturday afternoons, that was my only break through the whole week. I would rest on Saturday afternoons. I would go to church for a couple hours Saturday evening, and then I would just study the whole time. I was always just studying every day of the week outside of the Sabbath. And so, I remember just kind of the pushback I got from people I knew from church, that I was like, well, you guys never answer my questions. You never answer my questions. So I went and I found my answers, and I went and started studying the Bible with people who actually want to talk about, these kind of questions and why we do this kind of stuff and all that. Like, they really wanted to discuss it. And so I did too. And I was really grateful to kind of come across something that was so literally just so convenient. And I feel like I just popped in there just when I needed to, because, when I think about the timing now, I think about just being at the, at that Messianic congregation. And the church didn't stay around like for the entire time that I was there. Like a little after I left, it stopped. But I stopped going. My mom kept going. I think I went for about a whole year before I stopped going. And literally I just stopped because I just didn't want to study so intensely when I was already studying all the time. And I mean, I liked it. I enjoyed myself. It was a good time. Very small crew of people, but very dedicated to study. It was 6 of us or something. And, it was a good time. I had fun. I did have some debates with some of the people there. I remember, one of the old men was saying that, the Quran said something about, what did it say something about? It said something about, what did it say something about? It said, he was saying that the Quran said something about, not loving Christians or Jews or hating Jews or something like that. And I don't remember that being in the Quran. We were arguing, and he was saying that it was there, and I was saying I don't think it is because I read it. But then also I thought about it, and I was like, my reading comprehension isn't perfect, and even when I read textbooks, sometimes I don't fully grasp everything because it's a lot of content. When I'm faced with a lot to read, usually there's going to be something I miss. And so I read the Quran, but it's not like I studied it necessarily. So I just read it through, and that was it. This was in high school or something. So and then I was having this conversation in my first year of grad school. So, and I was in probably 10th grade or 9th grade when I read the Quran. And so, yeah, that's how I know that, and I think I did find a free Quran on a website, or it was a really discounted, nice, big, glossy pages. But like I mentioned before, when I gave away a lot of my Bibles and books and stuff that I had accumulated over the years, I think I put that one in the box and gave that one away too. But I don't know how I got off on all these topics, but basically, yeah, when it comes to that whole holy kiss thing, how the lady was mentioning about education being denied her, that's already a sign to me that anyone who doesn't promote education and free thinking, I mean, you gotta wonder why, you know. They're usually saying the same thing that they were taught, and what's the scare of learning? What's the scare? The scare is that people get fearful that someone's gonna learn and they're gonna leave the church, or they're gonna you know teach others things that they learned, and then nobody's gonna want to do this anymore. And we can't have that. We can't have people leaving the church and not learning the way that our forefathers learned or whatever. Like, we all need to think the same. We can't have people straying off the path or getting confused, or learning things that you know isn't really real, according to what the Bible says or what the religion teaches. We can't have that. So I think that's the mindset. Like, we can't have that. And to me, that's a form of control. It's a form of trying to, like, just keep people kind of down, so that they have to do these same rituals and have to keep the church organization big, so that people are able to benefit from it, so that churches have pastors that are getting paid, and conferences can run schools and hospitals, and there's money involved. I mean, it's not like, the Adventist church, as far as I know, isn't like greedy, money hungry. The hospitals are definitely big healthcare and educational systems for a lot of places. Like, I know a lot of Adventist universities where plenty of my non-Adventist friends have definitely gone to those, as well as multiple of my Adventist friends. I think most of the people I know have encountered Adventist hospitals. There's even one that I talked to as part of work, where we send our clients, that I didn't even know was Adventist, but it is. But yeah, it's it can be a little I don't know, that they can't just like yeah, they can't just like kind of like do what you need to do. What am I trying to say? That they can't just like let you learn, because it's, in a way, they feel maybe threatened by it. So I don't know, like, it's a little troublesome to me that is kind of like a common viewpoint of not getting full round education on stuff about your own personal self. Your own like understanding yourself better, learning how to like problem solve that, versus being kept so busy and so distracted by trying to do all these rules and all this study and all this reading and all this religious stuff, that you kind of have no time to really do other things. I remember being taught some pretty extreme ideas when I think about it. Like, I think in Ellen G. White's Steps to Christ, it talks a lot about prayer. It's a cool book, but there's this verse in the Bible, I don't remember where, but it It's just like pray continually or pray continuously or something like that. That's all there is to the verse. And what that looks like to try to do that, it's it basically trains your brain to just have this certain mindset all the time. But with that, for me, kind of came, a lot of the other like messages that I got that were negative about, well, if I'm not praying continually and if I'm not thinking like using the fruits of the Spirit from the Bible and like, if there's anything that deviates from like what the Bible is doing in my life during any portion of the day, if I wasn't thinking about God or if I wasn't thinking about some kind of scripture, then it was wrong, and it's like you do all this effort and then you're just like, oh man, I messed up again. Like I spent another day where I couldn't fully just focus on God, and then the next day comes around and you're like, all right, this day I'm gonna like fully focus, and not do anything like secular culture related and just like keep thinking about, everything, how it relates to the Bible, how it relates to prayer, like how, if I'm struggling with something in the moment, I can pray about it, and like, just never getting out of the mindset of thinking about the religious related things, actually is very stressful. It's not easy to really think like that, honestly. Like there is a peacefulness to it in a way when you're doing it willingly, but there were points when I wasn't doing it willingly. I was doing it because I thought if I don't do it, if I don't live my life like that, it's very possible that I might end up in hell. That's the only way to kind of be like pretty certain, as if you're following everything as best as you can most of the time. And I just thought, one of these days I'm just going to get to the point where I'm going to get better, that every single day I'm thinking about God all the time, and that maybe once or twice a year I'll have moments when I don't. Like I really thought that was like the goal to work towards, like for I don't know how long, but it must have been a long time that I kind of thought that way. And it's kind of like you kind of get on this, I don't know what you call it, like a religious high. It's kind of like a religious high. Like I don't understand like how to describe it, but I mean, it's my belief that having a religious high can be one of the most dangerous, not positive things to happen, because when you crash from that high, that is a different kind of crash than any other kind of crash. It's not the same as crashing from, substance related things. It's not the same as crashing from coffee. It's not the same as having some kind of like emotional, like just your brain and just body just stops functioning. It's not like that. Like having a spiritual crash is just like, when you have your whole like concept of like where your life's goals and life's purpose is going and why you're on this earth, and then you just start all of a sudden like questioning that, like that is not really a fun place to be in at all. I have multiple friends who experienced that before. We all kind of did almost at the same time at a pretty young age too. And I remember I had a lot of friends that went to this religious camp. They got real pumped up, and for like months we were just like pumped up about Jesus. Like it was like, I don't even know what, like we were like in some kind of like extreme, kind of like we had some teachers that were kind of like into a little bit of like religious alternative stuff, but still super Adventist. And so they had access to these like Christian camps and stuff, and like the kids who went there, they chose a few of the kids who they thought would be like a spiritual influence or something like that. And I remember the rest of us who didn't get to go felt super bad about that. We were like, dang, man, like we're seen as like, the teachers think that we're like the bad kids, or like, not holy or whatever. Like, we're not seen as like good enough. Like I remember definitely being like pretty upset about not being chosen to be like a part of the group who got to go. I really remember that. I was like, not understanding that at all. I was like, I read my Bible every day. Like, I'm in the Sabbath school and in the teen rap group, and I contribute, and like, I have things to say. I know what I studied, and like, I like to talk about it even with the pastors, and like, how did they not choose me? Like, my friends don't do that. Like, they don't even like read. They don't even all read the Bible or whatever, or like, it was just based on like their perception of like who were like the holy kids or something. Um, and I don't know, this was probably like seventh grade or ninth grade or something like that. Eighth grade or ninth grade, I mean. And I remember, the kids who came back just being like really enthusiastic. Like, if you've ever seen somebody go through like a motivational conference or something, and then they come out of that and they're like super pumped up. But this was pumped up on religion, pumped up on the Bible and Jesus and like these Acts prayers and like all this kind of like stuff that they're just like pumped about. And they, just the way they would talk was different. They were like, they would talk a little bit different. They were a little kinder. They tried to be like very religious. The way they prayed started sounding like real different. Whenever we were like in chapel and like doing like the music and like singing along, just like, oh my gosh, this song again, we're gonna sing the song, they'd be up like clapping and like, just like excited. And I remember during this time period, we would go to these like winter camps, like in the mountains, like in San Bernardino. And there was a camp we went to. It was a Bible camp in the winter during the school year, but I remember it would be snowing in the mountains, and we would go, and there were other schools there, a lot of other Adventist schools there, and we just stayed in the cabins, and there were showers, cabins, like, we could play sports sometimes, but most of the curriculum there was like a Bible-based kind of thing. So I remember being there and like, being with other kids and getting to mingle with the other kids. There was a lot of like music and like church every night, and like, I think it was about a week long, if not like 4 days or something. And some of it was weekdays, so you got to like miss some school, and it was optional, and we went, and it was, I don't even know, like, I just remember the specific year when we went. What I do remember is seeing the other Adventist school. We'd all have like a big church service every night, and we'd all be in the same like room where they had church. And our group was different from the other groups. Like, we would be like in the song services, just like we'd all be standing up and clapping and like singing our loudest, and like all the stuff that the kids at that Bible camp had gone through kind of rubbed off on us when we all went to this other camp. And then we were all just like super pumped up, and like, the way we would talk and the way we would just like interact with the other students from other schools was probably real weird. Like, we really thought we were like in the spirit and really just like pumped up. And then, eventually everybody kind of crashed from that, and it just became like I think everyone who had that experience got extremely depressed. Like, not like, I don't know if it was really in a suicidal way. I don't even think I really knew what that was back then, but it was like, just really like questioning the meaning of a lot of things that I think when you're that age, that is a weird experience to go through, when you're like, you can't really talk to your parents because they don't want to be talking about all these weird philosophical things, like, what's wrong with you? You can't really talk to the teachers because they're busy, they're teaching. You can't really talk to the pastors because they usually don't want to answer your questions if it's too challenging anyways. And then we try to make sense of it within each other and try to talk to each other, and we were just like debating about it, and like there was like no support whatsoever. And I don't know if every person goes through experiences like that, but that is probably one of the weirdest experiences I've had in my life, especially because it lasted like multiple months. Like, to be like that excitable multiple months, just like you wake up and you're just so pumped up about life because of like Jesus, and just like that to me was just weird. um and then it went away, and then it was like, oh, like, you can't get that back, like, it was weird. It was like a weird thing that had been going on for like multiple months. During that time, one of our teachers was having some other kind of breakdown of her own, so she was just having us do these weird, like, hippie kind of like practices, like sit under your desk and light a candle and write your eulogy and all. Like, we're like eighth graders, and like everybody's sitting under their desk crying, and like, yeah, this was like, I don't even know what the fuck, like, like, when I think of it, I'm like, what were we doing, and like, how come nobody put a stop to this, like, you know. But I mean, this was the educational system that, the school and the church were kind of a part of, and nobody thought that there was anything wrong with this, or like weird or bad or problematic. Like, looking back, I'm like, I don't think anybody knew better, because my teachers were probably in their 30s too, and they were probably just like, what is wrong with these kids, like, they're going nuts. Like, I don't think they really were like thinking through a lot of this stuff, and they thought it was kind of the right way to be too. So I don't think anybody was really challenging it. They were just glad that, we weren't like trying to run around and do drugs, and instead we were just having late night Bible studies and like praising Jesus and praying all night and stuff. Like, of course people would want that for their teens. Of course nobody's gonna be like, oh, you guys, you can't hang out at the beach at night because you're praying too late. Like, no, go pray all weekend long. We don't have to worry about what you do when you're skateboarding or anything. You're too busy praising Jesus. Like, just go, And so, I don't know. I've been on the end of things like that, where it's like, that I've even completely forgotten about. Like, it's so weird to me that I don't even fully have that, like, at the front of my memory on a daily basis. But it's, like, so weird. It was just such a weird time, and dude, I don't even know what to say about it. It was just such a weird time. Like, just pretty heavy. It was heavy. It was just intense, like, I don't regret it. It's just like, these are the kind of things that, like, when you're involved in a religion, you can't really explain it to people who don't really do that. Like, most people go to church on Sunday, if that, and then that's it. Like, you're not just like constantly just like doing this. And when you're doing this, not really even knowing how to feel about it, and then not getting answers from like the adults in your life who don't seem to really know what they're talking about. I got that vibe pretty early on, that I was like, these guys do not know what they're saying, or else they could explain this to me. Like, if you're my teacher, if you're my pastor, if you're my whatever, why can't you explain to me this whole book that we're reading all the time? Like, we read it every day. Like, you should know more than I do. You know what I mean? But it just started becoming frustrating with the learning experiences and the general experiences with stuff. We're just becoming more and more disconnected from like what I understood as like how to like gain knowledge and kind of like improve at stuff. And like, when I think about like people who are maybe like Mennonite or Amish or some religions, where you don't really get, a typical education, especially in like Western society, it's like, one thing about the Adventist church I do notice is that even if they do prefer their own education, it is overall a mainstream education. Like, you're not like totally behind when you like start, if you go to a different high school or college. Like, I was a little behind with stuff, but I knew how to study, I knew how to get the work done, I knew how to catch up, and then, I did good. But yeah, as far as like the social experiences, as far as like the just the normal type of stuff that people experience at certain age ranges, you know, you're just totally sheltered from all that kind of stuff. I mean, we were kind of like, we would venture out and like run around town and do whatever. And like I mentioned, you know, music, skateboarding, snowboarding, that kind of stuff kept us kind of in connection with like other kids that were kind of on the secular end. That kind of stuff kind of kept us more in connection, where we kind of understood more. So I kind of, you know, started just thinking about things like that. Like when I was listening, I didn't even get through the whole story. I'm gonna be honest; it was disgusting to me, and it wasn't even because it was women kissing women. I couldn't care less about that. It was just the fact that you have like young teens, you know, who aren't really consenting to certain things and are being kind of like coerced into like doing some kind of ritual that's kind of weird. To me, that's a little awkward and weird. It was kind of crossing a line, in all honesty, to me. And just the aspect of just like in general how they're kind of taught not to really like focus on learning more and educating themselves. Like she was saying, she wasn't educated about sexual education or STDs or anything. So it was kind of like, that just sounds like it's a pretty gross experience. Like, honestly, I don't think I would ever want to go into a church where every single woman kissed me. That does not sound appealing at all. All I can say is ew, but I mean, it's not like on her. I'm just saying, like, you know, that's kind of weird. But it's getting late. I gotta go eat. So I'm done with this, but thanks for listening.